This is Frankie Lynch, Saturn Girl. Like this video and subscribe to my channel. Comment below because I want to know what you think, and it helps me out with the algorithm. In fact, share my videos too. I need your help. I need your help, Obi-Wan, please. Anyway, well, we're talking today about a fun little transit that's happening in just a few days. In fact, on Sunday, August 27th, Mars, our thrusty man of maximum masculinity, is going to enter his sign of detriment, Libra. Well, what can we expect from this fun little transit here? Well, let's talk about it. I wore camo today for Mars, because, well, Mars, military war, but Mars is entering Libra, so I had to make it, a tie off midriff. So, well, my dad was actually a full colonel in the United States Army, so I'm an Army brat, and I have a soft spot for soldiers, but that's neither here nor there. What does this mean for you, for me, for us? Let's dive into it. What is Mars? He's about drive. He's about power. That's The Rock, and it's funny because The Rock has Mars trine his ascendant like I do. So, in fact, I have Mars conjunct my sun, and both of them trine my ascendant. And I have Mars opposite Jupiter and Uranus. So, I've got a lot of Mars, which you can see if you get to know me. So anyway, he's about drive, he's about power, right? So, Mars is what? Aggression, violence, war, masculinity, drive. But he's also honor, courage, passion, right? And valor. Those are his positive expressions. Valor. Well, what is Libra? Libra's an air sign, isn't it? In fact, being an air sign means Libra is masculine because the air and fire signs are considered masculine or yang or active, while the earth signs and water signs are considered feminine, yin, and passive. So Libra is also ruled by Venus, right? So he's a Venusian sign associated with Venusian things. But he's also cardinal, so he's powerful and he starts shit. Got to be starting something, got to be starting something. I love Michael Jackson, sorry. Get over, get under. If you know that, oh gosh, I'm 40 years old, so when I was a kid, Michael Jackson was like this stuff. He even had a Sega Genesis game, Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, right? So anyway, but, well, excuse me. So Venus rules relationships. Right? So Libra gets known as a very relationship-oriented sign, very socially aware. Libras are also often known as very cerebral, right? Very intelligent, but it's also very sensitive. The thing about Libras is they can often enter a room and just feel the temperature, and they can tell who's uncomfortable or upset. And usually that makes Libra uncomfortable. So it's like you just have to learn to deal with it because it usually results in people pleasing if we're not careful. And Libras are often known as very attractive or artistic. Now, not all of them, obviously. I think Theresa May is not necessarily a looker, right? Is a Libra. What? Eleanor Roosevelt, Libra, wonderful woman, but not necessarily known as a beauty queen either. So, that's the thing. But Libras can be very amiable, right? Agreeable, pleasant, and social butterflies. On the other hand, they can sometimes be regarded as wishy-washy, right? Two-faced or superficial. They don't like conflict, typically, right? And avoid fighting, just like Neville Chamberlain kept appeasing Hitler, right? I think Neville Chamberlain had a Libra midheaven. So that's what we saw about him. Now, what does Mars mean in Libra? Well, you may know that Mars rules both Aries and Scorpio. So the opposite signs, Libra and Taurus, are his signs of detriment. Now, what's that mean for him? It means he doesn't know what the fuck to do with himself there. Mars is action. So in Taurus, he's sluggish and lazy. It's hard for him to get going and accomplish things. Mars is also independent. He's concerned with his own affairs. He doesn't care about your feelings, does he? He's impulsive. He's direct. And he does things. He's not concerned with the affairs of others, more his own. So what happens to him in Libra? In Libra, he suddenly has to deliberate and consider the affairs of others, which isn't comfortable for him. He does not like it. But rather than complain directly, what does he do? He expresses his frustration passive-aggressively in witty banter or snarky quips or little, like, well, passive-aggressive little, what do they call them? Zingers. Zingers. Oh, yeah? I'm starting to think of a stupid one. I think from The Simpsons, like, they were making fun of sitcoms, and dude's like, you stole my manhood. And then the girl's like, that's petty theft, right? It's like the goofy stuff that writers write, to get cheap laughs from the studio audience. Do they even have that anymore? Or is it just laugh tracks? I don't know. Anyway, so Aries and Libra, the sign of Mars is detriment, right? So with Mars and Libra, he's not accustomed to being diplomatic. And he's not accustomed to social cues or caring about appearances, right? So when he expresses his frustration indirectly, it can get him into trouble. I have a joke about Libra Mars. Your bite better be big enough to back up that bark, right? Or, don't let your mouth make a withdrawal that your knuckles can't cover, right? So, I think those are funny, but you may beg to differ. What are some famous examples of this? Well, the first one that comes to mind is Eminem. Slim Shady. Because what? He's known for fighting with his words, isn't he? His wit and his snarky quips. Yo! Just think of all the feuds he's been in. First I think of Elton John, which a lot of you may be too young to remember. And then there was Machine Gun Kelly. And now it's the MAGA crowd, isn't it? He made a statement about politics and everything. It upset a bunch of people. So, we won't go into it. Excuse me. But there was also an incident, a live show, where he was being heckled. And he finally decided to talk shit back to the heckler. Before you know it, Eminem's launching off the stage to, take the guy on, and ends up striking the wrong person, right? I think I could say the word hits. Anyway, hits the wrong person. His bodyguards all jump in, try to get him back on stage, right? But it starts this whole big thing that was sort of like beyond him and that he really wasn't equipped to handle. Even though a bodyguard remarks that he could hold his own, but I think he had to say that. Anyway, I don't know. I wasn't there. Okay. Another example, well, I think of Libra Mars too, as having a lot of talk without actually doing anything. So my example here is Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, AOC, who I personally like as a politician. But the example that comes to mind is when she wore a white dress to the famous Met Gala, right? The art gala. Very hoity-toity thing. And her dress, it was white, and on the back, in big red letters, it said, tax the rich. I fully support that, right? I just wish she and the Justice Democrats would do a lot more than talking about it and wearing dresses stating it. Like, actually do things, push for these sorts of policies, right? So, to me, that's very Libra Mars. I mean, she's also known for her witty quips and banter, right? For her zingers on Twitter. She's very quick and intelligent, right? And you could see that as she's questioning, CEOs and employers in these House committee hearings that they do. Well, she also famously got in a fight with a New Jersey representative who was chairing the House Energy Committee. And this guy had a bunch of big oil money behind him, and she didn't back down. So, now, when I think of Libra Mars, I also think, well, Libra Mars is what? Could be a little bitch, can it? And who comes to mind? But little Ron DeSantis. Little Rhonda, right? I mean, the dude was a JAG lawyer, that's Judge Advocate General, in the Navy. In fact, he was stationed at Guantanamo Bay to oversee human rights during the worst human rights abuses, right, of the Iraq and Afghan wars. You may remember the headlines. Anyway, but a little suspect here. He was personally named and described by detainees and allegedly watched as they were, I don't know if I could say the T word, but treated, what T word I'm saying, right? I don't know if I could say it, torture? And he was alleged to even have smiled and anyway, these are what detainees said. Now, we're going to assume the best of him and say, well, gee, maybe it was just the Libra Mars tendency towards peer pressure. They are known to succumb to peer pressure, right? Because sometimes it doesn't have a spine of its own, right? But at the very worst, we could say, gosh, you know what? He's evil. I don't know. But the best or worst examples of his Libra Mars are in the way that Trump just endlessly gives him wedgies and swirlies in the media. Now, I do not support Donald Trump. However, it's really funny to watch because Libra Mars here in Little Ron DeSanctus, sorry. It's sort of like the kind of popular girl, like to use stupid incel terms, it's the beta Stacy, right? That shits on other girls and then all of a sudden, gets shit on by the alpha Stacy and, made fun of in front of everyone else. And then they just have to sit there and take it and smile, right? Because of all the popularity politics. So think of it like that a little bit. Now, he doesn't dare say anything about Trump, does he? So there's a debate coming up. We'll see how that goes. Little Rob DeSanctus. Meatball Rob. Sorry. When someone mispronounces your name in public and makes fun of you and you don't say anything, that's the worst of Libra Mars, isn't it? Anyway, Libra Mars can be wonderful too. Gosh, we saw AOC and Eminem. These are people who can be quite effective, right? Now, what does this mean for us? Well, some general advice here. Number 1, be direct, because you won't want to. Number 2, be honest, because you won't want to. Number 3, be respectful. You'll have that down, don't worry, right? You may have a desire to sugarcoat things. That doesn't help you right now. You may have a desire to avoid conflicts and not speak up because you don't want to rock the boat. But now you have to hold your time to a general standard of consistency because you'll have to see these things through, despite the discomfort. If something bothers you or doesn't sound right, don't hold it in. Speak up. Okay? You have to advocate for yourself because no one else will. You won't have Ron DeSantis or a JAG lawyer representing, well, they need this and that. No. Remember, the Buddha famously said, you have to be your own refuge. Who else could be your refuge? Well, so anyway, you'd have to look at the whole sign house placement of Mars here, of Libra. So what whole sign house Mars would be entering for you in order to get a sense of how this works out. So let's do your horoscopes. Remember, we do these for each rising sign. Okay, so it would really help if you knew your birth time, but I know a lot of you don't. So if you don't, you can look at it for your sun sign. Okay, that'll sort of work. But let's go ahead and start here. Well, number one, let's look at this. Mars, right? You see Mars here in Virgo at the very end. And then we have Mars approaching, and then finally on the 27th, entering Libra, right? So now we'll look at horoscopes for each of these fun things, right? So let's go ahead to Aries Rising. Okay, so for Aries Rising, that means Mars is entering your 7th house and rules your 1st and your 8th. So what's the 7th house? It's partners, marriages. What's the 1st house? It's self, mind, body, soul, the whole you. And the 8th is death, debt, and other people's stuff. So Mars was going through your 6th house of obligations for a while, right? So perhaps you did get some stuff done. Maybe you didn't want to do it, and maybe it wasn't fun. But now Mars is entering your 7th house, where he can cause rifts in relationships or partnerships, especially being in Libra. So the house that Mars rules, or the houses Mars rules, can indicate what the fights are about. So money, right, which is very typical, being the 8th house thing. All couples seem to fight about money. And then freedom, which is another big one. So wanting your space, right? We hear this, I need space. And we also hear things like, you need to be more careful with money, or you spend too much, right? It's very important that we're direct about these things because Libra doesn't want to be. And communication oftentimes will help us avoid breakups, which is a common thing with Mars going through the 7th house. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean breakups, but you probably will have to put extra effort into communicating. The most important thing here is don't keep score. This is a cooperation, not a competition. Okay, Mars? So let's move on to our Taurus Rising friends. So Taurus Rising, this means that Mars is going through your 6th house and then rules the 12th and 7th houses. So what's the 6th house? Enemies, injuries, illnesses, and obligations. The 12th house is isolation and mental illness, self-undoing. The 7th house is marriages, partnerships, as we said before, right? So Mars had been going through your 5th house for a while of children and sex. So you may have had conflicts with your kids. Or maybe you've been a little unhinged and horny. But see, now Mars is entering your 6th house of responsibility. This is his joy. We won't talk about planetary joys right now, but Mars rejoices in the 6th house because Mars is action. And the 6th house is the shit you don't want to do. And Mars just gives us the energy to get it done. So you'll see getting chores and obligations taken care of, right? The 12th and 7th houses could indicate what kind of stuff. So this could be stuff for partners. We also see legal matters here with the 7th house. And then with the 12th, we think of mental illness or addiction, perhaps, or something to do with your own isolation, confinement. Worst case, incarceration type things, you know. Now that's worst case scenario. That's, I just have to throw that out there. But whatever it is, Mars is saying that you'll have the energy to deal with it, but you need to cultivate the focus to really attend to it. Okay? And do one thing at a time. It was so funny. There was a Zen master. I got this from Eckhart Tolle. But there was a Zen master, apparently, who was meditating. And a reporter asks him, "What is Zen?" He looks over to the reporter and lifts one finger and says, "One thing at a time." And that always made a big impression on me. Anyway, let's move on to Gemini Rising. See, if people don't watch the Taurus thing, see, you have to watch all these. because you'll learn other fun things. So Gemini Rising, I love my Gemini Rising peeps. So this means Mars is going through your fifth house here, right? Fifth house, and rules your 11th and 6th houses. So the fifth house is what? Sex and fun and children. 11th house is hopes, wishes, dreams, friends. The 6th house is injuries and enemies and all that sort of stuff, right? So Mars had been going through your 4th house for a while of home and parents and, oh wait, sorry, let's go ahead. It's Gemini Rising. Goodness gracious, I'm sorry. So Mars had been going through your 4th house of home and parents. So you may have had fights or conflicts with them or with your landlords or, people to do with the home, mortgage companies, roommates, stuff like that. Excuse me. But now he's going into your 5th house where he stirs up your loins and or their fruit, which means your children, right? The fruit of your loins is your kids. So, well, what does that mean? So for those of us with kids, you'll likely see a lot of misbehavior and you'll probably get frustrated. For those of us without kids or with grown kids, you'll likely be sexually frustrated, regardless if you're getting any, right? It just won't be enough. It just won't be enough, right? Or I just can't get enough. I just can't get enough. I think that was Oingo Boingo. I don't remember. But we get a bit frisky and amorous, don't we? I mean, this just comes with the territory. So the 11th and 6th houses can show us the context here. The 11th house, expectations of our children may not be met, or they don't appreciate or understand the 6th house sense of responsibility, right? But the 11th house is also social media and networking. You may meet someone online, but there's probably something strange or unusual about them that doesn't match your expectations. But does reality ever match our expectations? No. You could also have the attitude of, we're going to have fun whether we like it or not, which is so characteristic of the 6th house, isn't it? Excuse me. But the lesson here is about lightening up and being flexible. The unexpected can end up being what we really wanted anyway. What we didn't know we wanted. Expectations are fine. It's okay to have expectations. But life is messy. And it doesn't always conform, does it? So we have to be adaptable. And not too attached to outcomes. But, cut yourself some slack. Well, how about Cancer Rising? Cancer Rising, friends. So for Cancer Rising, that means Mars is in the 4th house and rules the 10th and the 5th. 10th and 5th. So the 4th we talked about is home and parents. 10th is career and life direction. The 5th is children, sex, and fun. So Mars was touring your 3rd house for a while, wasn't he? That's community and extended family. So there may have been fights with siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors. Now Mars is going into the 4th house, which can stir up stuff with your parents or landlords, as we talked about before, right? But the nature of these conflicts could be indicated here by the 10th and 5th houses. So your life direction may be a sore spot with your parents. They don't like what you do. Or they disapprove of how you raise your kids. Or maybe your landlord just doesn't like all the sidewalk chalk, right? I remember there was a landlord who used to get all weird about sidewalk chalk back at a place I was at. So, well, either way, you're going to have to maintain your home and your boundaries, aren't you? Don't let people intrude. Don't let people intrude on your space or disturb your calm. You are the driver of your ship. And you can be the master of your life. If you so choose. Or you can let other people run it for you. As we are so apt to do. Well, anyway, let's move on to our Leo Rising friends. So we love Leo Rising, don't we? In the third, right? Mars is in the third house here for you, and then rules the ninth and the fourth. So the third house, as we just said, is community and extended family. It's also media and communication. The ninth house is spirituality, what we believe, and it's education or higher learning. While the fourth house is home and parents, right? So Mars had been going through your second house for a while, right? That's money and resources. So you likely spent more than you intended, didn't you? And you may suddenly find yourself having to scrimp. Now watch out for getting into fights with aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings, or even our neighbors, third house, right? People in our community. The ninth and the fourth house may show what the contention is all about here. So it could be religious or political arguments, right? That classic getting in fights with your uncle at, well, it's not Thanksgiving time yet, but it's some cookout, right? Over politics or religion. Now, I mean, that's pretty typical. There could also be a feud between another family member and your parents that sort of gets you stuck in the middle, like, you know, an uncle and your mom. You may have, you may find yourself being sort of an agitated mediator, right? Because it's Libra Mars. Mars being in Libra sort of flips him on his head. Of course, don't back down or abandon your principles during this time. But you're probably not going to convince anyone of your point of view either, are you? So either learn to shrug it off or, you know, do what the Libras do. Libra's like, I don't know. I don't know. Right? Oh my God, I'm such a Libra. Right? Oh my God, I'm a Libra. I think of like, I'm a Libra moon, you know, so, you know, I'm as deep as a crick, you know. I mean, there's no end to the depth of my shallowness. Stupid joke. But you see, Libra moon is Libra in general is very concerned with appearances. So anyway, well, let's move ahead to our Virgo rising friends. So Virgo rising, that means Mars is going through the second house now and rules the eighth and the third. Eighth and third. So the second house is our stuff and our finances. The eighth house is other people's stuff and finances. And death. The third house is community, siblings, and media. So Mars has been going through your first house of self for a while. That's pumping energy and pumping up your energy level, which also can pump up your irritation level, or maybe even aggression. So maybe you were impulsive, and now that could translate into spending more than you really should, or blowing through resources. You want to be mindful of waste here. Now, the eighth and third houses could show you where your resources are going. So it could be paying off debt, spending money on media or education, or perhaps something for a sibling or an extended family member. Either way, though, you need to mind your resources, because Libra Mars often has like this sense of guilt, doesn't it? And feels obligated to give to people when it doesn't have enough for itself. And the guilt can cloud your judgment. So always stay within your means, okay? Now, what about our Libra rising friends? Libra rising. So this puts Libra going through your first house, ruling the seventh and the second. We already talked about the first house being self, mind, body, soul, the whole you. The seventh house is being partnerships and marriages. And the second house is your money and resources. Excuse me. So Mars had been touring your 12th, which could have brought about some mental health challenges, or it could have isolated you from family and friends. But now it could bring you into a phase of activity and visibility again. Be careful, though, of being a bit hasty or impulsive, right? All of a sudden, you've got energy and aggression. Now, the seventh and second houses could show you where all this is sort of pushing you. You could be wanting to rush into a relationship, ignoring red flags. Or maybe you want to spend a bunch of money on yourself, you know, to try and dig yourself out of an emotional hole left from that whole isolation phase of Mars in the 12th. Both circumstances, though, have to do with being impulsive, don't they? And Libra Mars here really wants to salve that sense of longing, you know, by just filling it haphazardly. But you please, I mean, you got to take care of yourself first. And desires are fine in moderation because they may cause more hurt later. It's like, it's that endless Libra pendulum swinging between I like this and I don't like that, right? Or this makes me feel good and this makes me feel bad, right? I'm having fun drinking and then I'm hungover the next day or whatever. You know, I stay up too late and then I pay for it later. Whatever it is, okay? Excuse me. Pardon. Anyway, let's move on to Scorpio Rising. Our Scorpio Rising friends. This puts Mars going through your 12th house and ruling your 6th and your 1st. The 12th is what? Isolation. The 6th is what? Obligation. The 1st house is you. So these are all very, I've been mentioning what these houses are the whole goddamn time. So don't come at me later in the comments and be like, well, actually this house is that. Actually that house is this. No, I said it elsewhere. So back off. Anyway, so the 12th house is isolation and the 6th house obligation and blah, 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 blah. Mars was in your 11th house, which can bring about fights with friends. It can cause us to cut people off, like Mars is so apt to do. It can make opportunities fall through or give us some bad press, right? Or a bad reputation. In the 12th house, those things could smooth over with Mercury, but you will likely find yourself being forced into isolation. It may be that you alienated yourself from people with your temper tantrums. Or maybe you just need to figure some stuff out, you know? What you're figuring out, though, could have to do with the 6th house medical issues, right? Or daily responsibilities that you have to take care of. Or it could have to do with the 12th house mental health stuff, depression or substance issues. But the 1st house is involved, right? Mars rules your 1st house. So these have to do with you. They're your issues and not other people's. Now, the lesson here is about self-care, but I mean with a bit more fuerza or force, right? Because you may unknowingly sabotage yourself. Libra often doesn't look out for his own interests, right? Libra doesn't look out for himself so much. So it's more important that you conserve your energy rather than spreading yourself too thin, okay? Now let's talk about Sagittarius Rising. Our Sag Rising friends. So that means Mars is in your 11th house now, or will be going in, ruling your 5th and your 12th houses. The 11th is hopes and friends, the 5th is kids and sex, and the 12th is isolation and self-sabotage. Right? If you're coming back to me later and say, well, it's more than that. That's so reductive. Watch the rest of the video before you say any of that nonsense, because I mentioned other house significations elsewhere. And we don't want this to be more than a frickin' hour. So shut up. Be quiet. Be quiet. Don't say anything. Let me talk. Okay. I do the goblin voice. Like when I don't know. It's this goblin thing that I do. So anyway, we're talking about Sagittarius Rising. Mars has been going through your 10th house for a while, which can bring fights with bosses or authority figures, or you can find yourself embroiled in a competition with coworkers for promotions or new opportunities or raises. The other thing Mars can represent here is layoffs or termination. But now in the 11th house, you want to watch out for getting a bad reputation, okay? Because this is the hopes and friends and stuff. You don't want to alienate yourself by getting into these escalating conflicts with your homies. Here's one for me and one for my homies. That was Dr. Evil. Anyway, the 5th and the 12th house, though, can tell us where these conflicts are about, or what these conflicts are about, rather, which can mean someone's kids, a hookup or affair, a competition or sporting thing, right? Or it could be either, it could be one of your mental health or avoidance. You know, it could be your mental health or avoidance or your friends, right? So either way, though, this is about balance between picking your battles and standing up for yourself, right? So it is important to see where your energy is best spent. You don't want to just get into something that you'll regret later and just seemed like a waste. On the other hand, if you don't represent your interest, no one else will. So yes, speak up, but be wise about when you do, especially when it comes to authority figures, right? So, or people that could interfere with your advancement. The 11th house is also the people that help us achieve our goals and stuff. You want those people to help you. You don't want them to hurt you. Well, of course, be direct. So you're not just snarky, and you want to be clear so you're not just pissing people off. How about Capricorn Rising? So Mars is in the 10th, or will be going through your 10th. And then rules the 4th and the 11th house, right? The 10th is life direction, the 4th is origins, the 11th is friends. So Mars going through your 9th house for a while could have caused conflicts with your beliefs and arguments over them. Now, you probably have a greater sense of resolve in your principles now, which can also lead to greater conflicts with authority figures, because now, right, you're idealistic about what you believe. You're like, well, this is not right. Hands on hips. So the thing you want to be careful here is that you may want to tell a boss exactly what you think of them, especially if it's not very nice. It's like, for those of you who remember the 90s, having a Jerry Maguire moment. Like, I'm just going to freak out here. Right? Remember Tom Cruise and Jerry Maguire? Who's coming with me? Who's coming with me? And only Renee Zellweger wants to come with him. So, anyway. But you know what I'm talking about. The 4th and the 11th houses could show the nature, right, of these conflicts. Like maybe someone infringes on your space, or you feel like they steal your opportunities or your ideas. It's like you're in a meeting and they're like, well, what if we do this? It's like, motherfucker, I said that yesterday. What are you doing, homie? You thieved my stuff. Anyway. Infringes on your space, steals your ideas or opportunities. But the lesson here is about keeping your cool, right? In these really agitating circumstances. There are instances where you will be tested and challenged on not freaking out, because you could lose your reputation or your allies. So remember, who's coming with me? And only one person went with Jerry Maguire. He didn't have a lot of allies, did he? So let's make sure that's different for you. Now, how about our Aqua Rising friends? Aquarius Rising, that's me. So we have Mars now entering the 9th house, don't we? And ruling the 3rd and the 10th. So the 9th is what we believe. The 3rd is the media we consume and other things, right? The 10th is life direction. So Mars was in the 8th house, messing up our finances and our debt, right? Like making us accrue extra debt. So now you may have had a sense of idealism or even fanaticism about something, and you get taken down a peg. So you could be quite argumentative, and either a person or an idea shakes up your beliefs. I mean, I was just thinking about this for me because I didn't put 2 and 2 together. Oh, this could happen for me. When Mars tours on our ninth house, we get very like "Rawr," about what we believe. And I'm already that way, you know. And the thing Mars also does is cut things off. So we might find an abrupt contradiction or an abrupt something that makes it, that challenges our worldview, and we have to see things in a new way, which can be very good but also be very uncomfortable. So the third and the 10th house could tell us a little about this. For example, it could be like an argument with an uncle at a cookout, right? That's very typical. The third house rules extended family, like uncles and aunts and cousins. You know, um, one or both of you could be drunk on fake news or media echo chambers, right? You would do best not to get too attached to any belief, any idea, because we're always ultimately wrong, aren't we? And we have to get used to it. One of my favorite quotes is, I believe this is Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre. He said, "To seek truth is to prefer being above all else, even in a catastrophic form, simply because it exists." To me, I interpret that as truth or reality at all costs, regardless of what you may find, regardless of expectations, even if it's catastrophic, merely because what? It exists. So anyway, excuse me. Well, what about Pisces Rising? Pisces Rising. So this means Mars is going through the 8th house for you, ruling the 2nd and the 9th. And the 8th is other people's stuff. The 2nd is your stuff. And the 9th is your beliefs. So Mars was going through your 7th house for a while, stirring up trouble in relationships, probably. You may have even had a breakup. Now you may have unexpected expenses that bring you more debt. Or you may have a loan that you have to take out. It could be a car loan. It could be student loans. I don't know. Worst case scenario, though, is the loss of a person or pet. This is what happened to me with Mars going through my 8th house. But it doesn't have to be that way. That's the worst case scenario, okay? Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen. I feel obligated to say it just in case. Now, the nature of your expenses could be indicated by the 2nd and 9th houses. So, for example, it could be having to invest in your business or your livelihood, spending money to make money, right? General investments, like investing in the stock market or a pension or something like that, where you have to save. Excuse me. You may have to take on a loan, right? Or we already said that. I'm so sorry. It could also be a big vacation somewhere. Something that's for you. The 9th house is long distance travel. So that's why I mentioned that. In each case, though, you're being prompted to take careful stock of your resources, aren't you? You got to budget yourself. When Mars goes through the 8th house, it's like, yo, we need to work on a budget. Okay? Libra likes nice things, doesn't he? So you need to make careful decisions about what expenses are really priority. Well, I hope this is useful for everyone. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Like, subscribe, and share this video. People need to see their horoscopes. Also, I do wonderful readings, the best. All my contact information is below in the description. Please book a reading. Now, I love you. You're beautiful. And have a wonderful whatever you're having.